I stood face to face with my brother Derek in front of 30 family members at our reunion barbecue. He had just discovered I owned a $12 million real estate portfolio and was screaming accusations. "You didn't earn any of this. You only succeeded because of family money. The same family that gave me everything while you worked from nothing." The irony burned through me. Everyone stared in stunned silence as Derek's hypocrisy hung heavy in the summer air. But then Uncle Frank slowly stood up with a manila envelope, his weathered face grim. "Actually, Derek, there's something you need to know." The memory of that confrontation sent me spiraling back to where it all began. I was 8 years old, standing in our garage in Colorado Springs, watching Dad load Derek's brand new soccer cleats into the car. My 6-year-old brother bounced excitedly in his fresh uniform while I wore the same beat-up sneakers I'd had for 2 years. "Why can't I get new shoes, too?" I asked Mom, who was rushing around gathering Derek's water bottle and energy bars. "Tony, you don't need them like Derek does," she replied without looking at me. "Soccer is Derek's passion. You can make do with what you have." That became the soundtrack of my childhood. Derek needs this. Derek's passion requires that. Derek, Derek, Derek. Our house revolved around my younger brother's soccer schedule. Dad Robert would race home from his accounting job every Tuesday and Thursday to drive Derek to practice at Pine Valley Youth League, the most expensive club in town. Saturdays meant tournaments. Sundays meant recovery. Meanwhile, I walked myself to school, rode my bike to the library, and figured out my own transportation to everything. I remember the day I won first place at the regional science fair. I'd spent 3 months building a working model of a water purification system, staying up late in the basement with salvaged PVC pipes and filters I'd bought with allowance money. Mrs. Henderson, my 4th grade teacher, told me it was the most impressive project she'd seen in 20 years of teaching. The ceremony was scheduled for 6 o'clock on a Thursday evening. I reminded Mom and Dad every day for 2 weeks. They promised they'd be there, promised they wouldn't miss it. But when I walked across that stage to receive my trophy, I scanned the auditorium and saw only Mrs. Henderson clapping from the teacher section, empty seats where my parents should have been. I found them later at Derek's soccer practice, cheering as he ran drills with Coach Williams. "How did it go, honey?" Mom asked absent-mindedly, not taking her eyes off the field. "I won first place," I said, holding up my trophy. "That's nice, sweetheart." Derek just scored 3 goals in scrimmage. The trophy felt heavier in my hands as I watched Derek high-five his teammates. That night, he knocked it off my dresser during one of his tantrums about homework. The golden figure snapped off at the base. When I showed Mom the broken pieces, she sighed and said, "Accidents happen, Tony. Be understanding." Derek's under a lot of pressure with soccer. That's when I started my first business. At 10 years old, I began mowing lawns in our neighborhood every Saturday morning. Mrs. Patterson down the street paid me $15 to cut her grass and trim her hedges. Mr. Rodriguez hired me to rake leaves in the fall and shovel snow in winter. By the end of 5th grade, I had saved $300 in a coffee can under my bed. Derek, meanwhile, got private soccer coaching from Coach Williams. $200 a week for one-on-one training sessions. Mom justified it by saying Derek had natural talent that needed nurturing. For my 11th birthday, they gave me a library card and a pat on the head. Derek got a custom soccer goal installed in our backyard for his 9th birthday, complete with professional netting and regulation measurements. I started a paper route at 11, waking up at 5:30 every morning to deliver the Colorado Springs Gazette. 47 houses, rain or shine, snow or heat. $28 a week that went straight into my savings. I bought my own school supplies, my own clothes, my own birthday presents. Derek's room overflowed with trophies, medals, and gear that our parents gladly purchased. The breaking point came when I discovered my coffee can was lighter than it should have been. I counted the bills 3 times before confronting Dad in his study. "Someone took money from my room," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Dad didn't even look up from his computer. "We borrowed some for Derek's soccer camp registration. It was due today, and we were short." "Borrowed?" The word felt foreign. "You took $60 from my lawn mowing money without asking? It's a family investment, Tony. Derek's going to get a scholarship someday. This camp could change his future. Money isn't everything." But money was everything when you didn't have anyone giving it to you. Money was the difference between new cleats and duct-taped sneakers. Money was the difference between parents who attended your achievements and parents who attended your brother's practice. Money was independence, and they had just taught me that even my hard-earned independence could be taken away for Derek's benefit. I opened a bank account the next week. I was 12 years old, and I never kept cash in the house again. High school amplified everything that was wrong with our family dynamic. Derek enrolled at Pine Valley Soccer Academy as a freshman, a prestigious program costing $15,000 annually. The same year I started at Mountain View High. I also started working at Peterson's Grocery after school, stocking shelves and bagging groceries for $8 an hour. Sarah Martinez noticed it first. We'd been dating for 3 months when she came over for dinner and witnessed the full spectacle of Derek worship. Mom had prepared his favorite meal, lasagna with garlic bread, because he'd scored a goal in practice that day. The dining room table was covered with his team photos, tournament medals, and college recruitment letters. "Tell Sarah about the goal, Derek," Dad urged, his eyes lighting up. The footwork was incredible. Derek launched into a 10-minute description of a routine practice drill while I sat quietly eating. Sarah kept glancing at me, her eyebrows rising higher with each detail of Derek's heroic tale. After dinner, we escaped to my room where Sarah immediately asked, "Does your family always revolve around your brother?" I shrugged, embarrassed. "Pretty much. What about your job? What about school?" "You're salutatorian, Tony. That's incredible. They don't really notice stuff like that." Sarah's face hardened. "That's not normal." But normal was relative in the Harper household. Normal was Derek getting a brand new BMW for his 16th birthday while I saved every penny to buy a used pickup truck from Mr. Gallagher, my shop teacher. Normal was my parents attending every single one of Derek's games, home and away, but missing my graduation where I was named salutatorian. They were at Derek's tournament in Denver that day, a travel competition that happened to fall on the same weekend. Mr. Gallagher became an unexpected mentor during those years. He taught automotive repair and construction basics, skills that fascinated me far more than Derek's soccer statistics fascinated our parents. I spent every free period in his workshop, learning to weld, frame walls, and troubleshoot electrical problems. While Derek relied on others to solve his problems, I was developing the ability to fix anything myself. "You've got good hands, Harper," Mr. Gallagher told me one afternoon as I finished rebuilding an engine. "More importantly, you've got a good head. You think through problems instead of expecting someone else to handle them." Those words meant more than any praise I'd received at home. Summer jobs became my education in the real world. I worked construction with Gallagher's brother-in-law, learning foundation work and framing. I landscaped for Rodriguez Family Gardens, understanding irrigation systems and plant care. I painted houses, cleaned gutters, and hauled demolition debris. My hands were permanently stained with work. My muscles developed from actual labor instead of organized sports. Derek's summers were spent at elite soccer camps across the country. Camp Pinnacle in California cost $4,000 for 2 weeks. Mile High Soccer Academy in Denver was another $3,000. He'd return with stories of famous coaches and potential scholarships, while I returned with paychecks and practical skills. The pattern became more pronounced during our teenage years. Derek barely maintained a C average, despite expensive tutoring sessions at $100 per hour. Mom hired specialists for his math, English, and science classes, creating elaborate excuse systems for his poor performance. "Derek's mind works differently," she'd explain. "He's focused on athletics, not academics." Meanwhile, I studied on my own, worked 20 hours a week, and maintained a 3.9 GPA. My achievements earned brief nods and immediate redirections to Derek's latest soccer update. When Derek's girlfriend Jessica Walsh started visiting regularly, our parents transformed into different people. Jessica came from one of Colorado Springs' wealthiest families, and Mom suddenly cared deeply about impressing her parents. "We need to show the Walshes that we're a sophisticated family," Mom announced one evening. "I've made reservations at the Broadmoor for dinner tomorrow night." The Broadmoor was the most expensive restaurant in the city. The reservation would cost more than I made in a month at Peterson's Grocery. "Who's paying for this?" I asked. "It's a family expense," Dad replied curtly, but I knew exactly who was paying. The money came from the household budget that could have covered new tires for my truck or textbooks for my AP classes. Instead, it went toward impressing a 17-year-old girl's parents, so they'd approve of Derek's relationship. The irony stung because I was the one contributing to that household budget with my grocery store wages. Jessica's presence changed our family dinners completely. Suddenly, Mom cared about tablecloths and centerpieces. Dad talked about his accounting clients, as if he managed Fortune 500 companies instead of small local businesses. Derek preened and performed, describing soccer achievements that sounded increasingly exaggerated with each telling. The breaking point came during my senior year. I'd been accepted to Colorado State University with a full academic scholarship for engineering, covering tuition, room, board, and books. It was a full ride based on my grades, test scores, and a research project I'd developed about sustainable construction materials. I expected celebration. I got disappointment. Colorado State? Mom frowned when I showed her the acceptance letter. That's not where Derek wants to go. Derek's a sophomore. This is about my college. But we've been planning for Derek to attend the University of Denver. Their soccer program could lead to professional opportunities. If you go to Colorado State, it makes Derek's school choice look less impressive by comparison. Dad nodded agreement. Maybe you should consider declining the scholarship, Tony. You could work for a year or two and save money for Derek's college expenses. Family comes first. The scholarship letter crumpled in my fist. They wanted me to decline a full ride to engineering school so I could work and pay for Derek's college experience. The same Derek who barely maintained C grades and had no concrete plan beyond playing soccer for 4 more years. That night, I called the admissions office and confirmed my enrollment. I was leaving for college with or without their support, and for the first time in my life, I didn't care what they thought about my decision. Colorado State University became my refuge from the suffocating dynamics of home. I threw myself into mechanical engineering coursework while living in the cheapest dorm available and working campus maintenance to cover personal expenses. My scholarship covered academics, but I wanted complete financial independence. No more family money, no more guilt about resources, no more watching Derek receive what I had to earn. Professor Emma Rodriguez changed the trajectory of my life during sophomore year. Her real estate development class was an elective I took out of curiosity, but her approach to property investment opened my eyes to possibilities I'd never considered. Professor Rodriguez had built a substantial portfolio while teaching, and she recognized something in my questions and work ethic. Most students see real estate as speculation, she told me after class one day. You see it as engineering. That's rare. She was right. While other students focused on quick profits and market timing, I analyzed properties like construction projects, square footage, foundation quality, electrical systems, neighborhood infrastructure, demographic trends. My background in construction and repair gave me advantages that business majors lacked. I could estimate renovation costs accurately and spot structural problems that others missed. My roommate Marcus Bailey shared similar interests. He was studying business with a focus on property management, and we spent countless hours researching local real estate markets. While our dorm mates played video games or attended parties, we studied foreclosure listings, analyzed comparable sales, and mapped investment opportunities around Fort Collins. The foreclosed duplex appeared in listings during spring semester of sophomore year, 1,800 square feet, built in 1978, needing comprehensive updates but structurally sound. The bank wanted $45,000, and similar properties in good condition sold for $70,000. The profit potential was obvious, but I needed financing. No bank will loan to a college student with no income history, Marcus warned. Even with your construction background, he was wrong. Amanda Foster at First National Bank reviewed my application with surprising interest. My work history impressed her, especially the variety of skills I'd developed. When I explained my renovation plans in detail, including cost estimates for materials and labor, she offered a creative solution. I'll approve a $36,000 loan if you can put $9,000 down, she said. But I want monthly progress reports and photos of the work. $9,000 represented every penny I'd saved since high school. My entire financial cushion went into that down payment, but the duplex became my real education. I spent that summer living in one unit while renovating the other. New flooring, updated electrical, modern appliances, fresh paint inside and out. I did every bit of work myself, drawing on skills learned from Mr. Gallagher and construction crews. Meanwhile, Derek was enjoying his sophomore year at the University of Denver. His tuition alone cost $38,000 annually, not counting room, board, and his active social life. Mom called me twice that entire semester, both times to report Derek's achievements. He scored the winning goal against Colorado College, she gushed during one conversation. The coach thinks he might make varsity next year. That's great, I replied, covered in joint compound from installing drywall. I bought a house. Oh, that's nice, sweetheart. Did I mention Derek was featured in the school newspaper? The disconnect was so complete that I stopped mentioning my real estate activities during family phone calls. They couldn't comprehend that their older son was building wealth while their younger son was consuming it. By fall semester of junior year, I'd rented the renovated unit to graduate students for $800 monthly. The rental income covered my mortgage payments and generated $200 monthly profit. Professor Rodriguez helped me identify the second property, a single-family home near campus that needed extensive kitchen and bathroom updates. This time I qualified for conventional financing based on the duplex's rental income and my demonstrated renovation abilities. Marcus joined as a partner, contributing his business knowledge while I handled construction management. Derek's phone calls home painted a different picture of college life. The social aspects of university are important for networking. I overheard him explaining to Dad during Christmas break. My fraternity connections will help with career opportunities after graduation. Derek had joined Sigma Chi, one of the most expensive fraternities on campus. Dues, social events, and spring break trips added another $15,000 annually to his college costs. He'd changed his major from business to communications after struggling with accounting and finance courses. Communications was known as the easiest degree program at University of Denver, perfect for students who wanted college experiences without academic challenges. Meanwhile, I was learning property law, construction codes, tax implications of real estate investment, and small business management. My grades remained high in engineering courses, but my real education happened in rental properties and renovation projects. Marcus and I developed systematic approaches to tenant screening, maintenance scheduling, and profit optimization. The breaking point came during spring break of Derek's junior year. He and his fraternity brothers planned a week in Cancun, Mexico, costing $3,000 per person. When Derek called asking for financial help, Mom and Dad liquidated bonds they'd been saving for retirement. It's important for his development, Mom explained when I questioned the expense during a rare family phone call. Experiences like this build character and create lifelong memories. $3,000 for a week of drinking on the beach builds character. You wouldn't understand, Tony. You've always been more practical. Derek needs these social experiences for his future career. The conversation ended with Mom asking if I needed money for food or textbooks. I told her I was fine, but didn't mention that I was fine because I owned rental properties generating $1,500 monthly while Derek consumed everything they could provide. That summer, Derek got arrested for possession of marijuana and underage drinking at a house party near campus. The legal fees, court costs, and expert witnesses needed to avoid conviction totaled $75,000. Mom called me sobbing, explaining they'd emptied their retirement accounts to pay Derek's lawyers. "We need to ask for your help," she said through tears. "Could you loan us money to cover the remaining legal expenses?" For the first time in my life, I said no to my family. "I can't afford to loan you money." It wasn't entirely true. I could have liquidated investments to help with Derek's legal problems, but something inside me refused. Every dollar I'd earned came from my own work, my own risk, my own sacrifice. Derek's problems resulted from choices he'd made while living on family money. Why should my hard-earned wealth solve problems created by their endless financial support? "You're being selfish," Dad said when he took the phone. Derek made a mistake, but he's still family. When you have money and family needs help, you help. That's what families do. "Is it what Derek would do for me?" I asked. The silence stretched for 30 seconds, before Dad hung up without answering. They paid Derek's legal fees by borrowing against their house, adding $40,000 to their mortgage, while I continued building wealth through disciplined real estate investment. My relationship with my parents grew more strained, As Derek's problems mounted and my success became undeniable, they couldn't acknowledge my achievements without admitting their favoritism, and they couldn't stop supporting Derek without acknowledging their enabling behavior. The cognitive dissonance created a family dynamic where my success was ignored and Derek's failures were excused. But my portfolio kept growing. By graduation, I owned 4 rental properties and had established relationships with contractors, lenders, and property managers throughout northern Colorado. Marcus and I formalized our partnership, creating Harper Bailey Property Development with clear investment strategies and growth projections. Derek graduated 6 months late, after failing 2 communications courses and needing summer school to complete his degree requirements. His graduation party cost $8,000 and featured a catered dinner for 50 people at the country club. I wasn't invited to speak or participate beyond showing up. The celebration focused on Derek's accomplishment of finishing college, while ignoring that I'd graduated summa cum laude in mechanical engineering while building a profitable business. The pattern was established. Derek failed upward with family support while I succeeded despite family indifference, but I was just getting started. My engineering degree became the foundation for scaling up property investments. While Derek moved back home after college to figure out his next steps, I relocated to Denver's rapidly expanding real estate market. The city's tech boom was creating demand for housing that far exceeded supply, and my construction background gave me advantages that financial investors lacked. Helen Crawford recognized my potential immediately. She was 62 years old, owned 37 rental properties across 3 states, and had built her wealth over 4 decades of systematic real estate investment. When I approached her about partnership opportunities, she spent 3 hours grilling me about renovation costs, tenant management, and market analysis. "Most young investors want shortcuts," she said after our meeting. "They want to flip properties quickly or speculate on appreciation. You understand that wealth comes from cash flow and compound growth. That's wisdom beyond your years." Helen became my mentor and eventually my business partner. Her experience combined with my technical skills created opportunities neither of us could have accessed alone. She provided capital and connections, while I handled renovation management and market analysis. Our first joint purchase was a 12-unit apartment building in Capitol Hill that needed comprehensive updates. Meanwhile, Derek was cycling through various career attempts back home in Colorado Springs. His first job was as a personal trainer at Peak Fitness, a position he held for 4 months before deciding that dealing with clients was too stressful. Next came a brief stint selling nutritional supplements through a multi-level marketing company called Apex Nutrition. That lasted 6 months before Derek realized he'd spent more money on products than he'd earned in commissions. Derek's most ambitious venture was cryptocurrency trading. He studied YouTube videos and joined online forums dedicated to digital asset optimization. For 8 months, he claimed to be making significant profits trading Bitcoin, Ethereum, and various altcoins. His social media posts featured screenshots of successful trades and motivational quotes about financial independence. "I'm up $12,000 this quarter," he announced during one family dinner I attended while visiting home. "Crypto is the future. Traditional investments like real estate are obsolete." I didn't argue, but I also didn't mention that my rental properties were generating $4,200 monthly in passive income while Derek's cryptocurrency gains existed only on computer screens. 6 months later, his digital assets lost 80% of their value during a market crash, wiping out his imaginary profits and leaving him with maxed-out credit cards he'd used to fund his trading. My portfolio expanded methodically during those years. Helen and I developed a systematic approach. Identify undervalued properties in neighborhoods experiencing economic growth. Purchase buildings with strong bones but cosmetic problems. Renovate efficiently using reliable contractor teams. And manage properties for long-term cash flow rather than quick profits. By age 25, I owned 8 properties across Denver and its suburbs. My net worth exceeded $400,000, and my monthly rental income covered all personal expenses while leaving surplus for reinvestment. I drove a modest Honda Civic, lived in a simple apartment, and spent money primarily on property acquisitions and renovations. Derek's lifestyle, meanwhile, required constant family support. Mom and Dad paid his rent, car insurance, cell phone bill, and credit card minimums. They justified these expenses as helping him get established, but Derek showed no signs of establishing anything beyond comfortable dependency. When he announced his engagement to Nicole Price, a woman he'd met through online dating, our parents immediately began planning an elaborate wedding. "We want Derek to have a perfect celebration," Mom explained when she called asking if I'd contribute to wedding expenses. "Nicole comes from a successful family. We need to show that we can provide an appropriate ceremony." The budget exceeded $85,000. Venue rental, catering, photography, flowers, music, and honeymoon costs would require our parents to borrow against their home equity again. They expected family members to contribute, with suggested amounts based on financial ability. My suggested contribution was $15,000. "I'm not paying for Derek's wedding," I told Mom directly. "He's never contributed to anything in our family. Why should I fund his party?" "Because you can afford it, and we can't," she replied. "Sometimes family members with more help, those with less. That's how families work." But that wasn't how our family had ever worked. When I needed help, I got lectures about self-reliance. When Derek needed help, everyone was expected to contribute. The double standard had become so embedded that my parents genuinely couldn't understand why I resented being asked to subsidize Derek's lifestyle while my own achievements went unrecognized. The wedding planning revealed the extent of Derek's deception about his financial situation. Nicole's family conducted standard background checks as part of their approval process, discovering that Derek was unemployed, $30,000 in credit card debt, and living entirely on family support. His social media posts about successful business ventures were complete fiction. When Nicole's father confronted Derek about his finances 2 weeks before the wedding, Derek couldn't provide satisfactory explanations. His cryptocurrency trading had been funded entirely by family money and credit cards. His supplement sales business had never generated profits. His personal training certification had expired. He had no income, no assets, and no realistic plans for supporting a wife. Nicole canceled the engagement 3 days later, leaving Derek devastated and our parents responsible for wedding expenses already incurred. Deposits for venue, catering, and photography totaled $28,000, none of which could be recovered. Derek blamed me for the wedding's collapse. "If you'd helped financially, I could have gotten my business stable," he argued during a heated phone call. "Nicole's family would have seen that I have support and potential. You sabotaged my relationship by being selfish." The logic was stunning. Derek believed my refusal to subsidize his lifestyle had caused his fiancée to discover his lack of financial stability. He couldn't understand that his problems stemmed from his own choices and dependency, not from my unwillingness to enable him further. Our parents arranged a family intervention 2 months after the canceled wedding. They'd driven to Denver uninvited and demanded that I meet them at a restaurant to discuss family responsibilities. The conversation lasted 45 minutes and covered familiar territory. "Derek is struggling emotionally," Dad explained. "The wedding situation embarrassed him and damaged his confidence. He needs family support more than ever." "What kind of support?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Financial assistance to help him get back on his feet. Maybe you could bring him into your real estate business or loan him money to start fresh somewhere else." Mom nodded eagerly. "You've been so successful with property investment. Derek could learn from you if you gave him a chance." I looked at my parents across the restaurant table, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time. They genuinely believed that Derek's problems could be solved by throwing more money at them, even money that wasn't theirs to give. They couldn't comprehend that their constant financial support had created Derek's inability to function independently. "I'm not giving Derek money," I said quietly. "I'm not hiring him for my business. I'm not responsible for fixing problems he created." "You're his brother," Mom replied, her voice rising. "When one family member succeeds, they help others succeed too. That's what love means." "No," I said, standing up from the table. "Love means teaching people to take care of themselves. What you've done to Derek isn't love, it's enabling. And what you've done to me isn't family support. It's taking me for granted." I left the restaurant without paying for their meals, a small gesture that felt symbolic. For 25 years I'd been expected to contribute while Derek consumed. The dynamic was so ingrained that my parents couldn't imagine any alternative arrangement. But I was building wealth precisely because I understood what they didn't. Success comes from discipline, sacrifice, and delayed gratification. Derek's failures weren't my responsibility to fix, and his comfort wasn't my obligation to fund. My business would continue growing while Derek continued struggling, and eventually, the contrast would become impossible to ignore. That day was approaching faster than anyone realized. Uncle Frank's annual family reunion had always been neutral territory for the Harper clan. His ranch outside Pueblo provided space for the entire extended family to gather every August, featuring horseback riding, fishing, barbecuing, and competitive cornhole tournaments that lasted until dark. This year marked the 20th anniversary of the tradition, bringing together 43 relatives from across Colorado and neighboring states. I drove down in my reliable Honda, the same car I'd owned for 3 years despite having the means to buy something newer. Simplicity kept overhead low and avoided drawing attention to my financial situation. My family had never shown genuine interest in my success, so I'd stopped volunteering information about business developments or property acquisitions. Derek arrived 2 hours later, in a leased Mercedes C-Class, the monthly payments for which I knew exceeded what most people spent on rent. He climbed out wearing designer jeans, expensive sunglasses, and a watch that probably cost more than my car's value. His girlfriend Crystal hung on his arm, equally overdressed for a ranch barbecue. "Tony," Derek called out with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Good to see you, brother. Still driving the old Honda? Still gets me where I need to go," I replied evenly. Derek launched into an update about his latest business venture, something involving social media marketing and influencer partnerships. He spoke vaguely about client acquisition strategies and revenue optimization, but provided no concrete details about income or operations. Crystal nodded supportively, clearly impressed by terminology she didn't understand. Cousin Billy approached our conversation carrying 2 beers and wearing his perpetual accountant expression of mild skepticism. "Derek, remind me what your company actually does," he asked with innocent curiosity. "We help brands maximize their digital presence through strategic engagement protocols," Derek replied smoothly. "It's pretty technical stuff. Not everyone understands the algorithms involved." Billy nodded thoughtfully. "Sounds complicated. Tony, how's the real estate business going?" "Can't complain," I said. "Sold a property last week, actually." Derek jumped in immediately. "Tony's got this little real estate hobby. Buys rundown houses and fixes them up. It's kind of like house flipping, but smaller scale." I let the characterization stand without correction. Derek's need to minimize my success revealed more about his insecurities than any argument could. Billy, however, looked puzzled by the description. The afternoon proceeded with typical reunion activities. Uncle Frank organized horseshoe competitions, while Aunt Linda coordinated the potluck dinner. Cousins Janet and Mike shared updates about their teaching careers and growing families. Grandpa Walter told the same stories he'd told for 20 years, and Grandma Rose dispensed advice about marriage, child rearing, and proper cornbread recipes. Derek held court near the pool, regaling younger cousins with tales of his entrepreneurial adventures. He name-dropped celebrities supposedly connected to his business and hinted at major deals pending final approval. Crystal documented everything on social media, posting photos of the Mercedes and adding captions about family time with my successful entrepreneur boyfriend. I spent most of the afternoon helping Uncle Frank with ranch chores and talking with cousins about their careers and interests. No one asked probing questions about my business operations, which suited me perfectly. Real wealth doesn't require an audience, and genuine success doesn't need constant validation. The shift came during dinner preparation when Billy pulled out his phone to check work emails. As the family accountant, he reviewed property transactions throughout Colorado as part of his professional duties. His firm handled closings for several major real estate investment companies, giving him access to public records databases that tracked large transactions. "That's weird," Billy muttered, staring at his phone screen. "What's weird?" asked Janet, arranging potato salad on the picnic tables. "I'm seeing a real estate sale this week for a property in Denver. The seller has the same name as our Tony." Several family members looked in my direction with mild curiosity. It wasn't unusual for people to share names, especially common ones. But Billy's expression grew more confused as he scrolled through additional records. "This is really strange," he continued. "There are multiple recent transactions with the same seller name. Properties in Denver, Aurora, Lakewood, and Westminster. Some pretty significant values," Derek overheard from across the patio. "What are you talking about, Billy?" "I'm looking at property records, and there's someone named Anthony Harper who's been really active in commercial real estate. Sold a building in Capitol Hill last week for $2.8 million. The conversation around the picnic tables grew quieter as family members processed this information. Derek laughed dismissively. "It's probably someone else. Tony does small residential stuff, houses and duplexes. Right, Tony?" All eyes turned to me as I stood holding a plate of Uncle Frank's famous barbecued ribs. The moment felt surreal, like being called to answer questions I'd never been asked. "Yeah," I said simply. "That was one of mine." Billy's phone nearly slipped from his hands. "You sold a building for $2.8 million? It was a good investment," I replied, trying to downplay the significance. "Bought it 4 years ago, renovated it, and found the right buyer." But Billy was already scrolling through more records, his accountant brain putting pieces together with growing amazement. "Holy crap, Tony. According to these records, you've completed transactions worth over $12 million in the past 18 months alone." The patio fell silent except for sizzling sounds from Uncle Frank's grill. 43 family members stared at me with expressions ranging from surprise to disbelief to admiration. Derek's face cycled through confusion, shock, and something approaching anger. "12 million? Grandpa Walter asked slowly. "Son, are you saying you're worth $12 million? "That's just recent transaction volume," Billy corrected, still scrolling. "This doesn't show his current holdings." "Tony, how many properties do you own right now?" The question I'd never wanted to answer at a family gathering hung in the air like smoke from the barbecue pit. There was no way to minimize the truth without lying, and I'd never been comfortable with deception. 17 properties, I said quietly. Commercial and residential. The portfolio's worth about 12 million, give or take. Cousin Janet's fork clattered against her plate. Crystal stopped taking selfies and stared at me with her mouth open. Uncle Frank set down his barbecue tongs and shook his head slowly. Even Grandma Rose looked stunned, and she'd lived through the Depression. Derek stood frozen beside his expensive car, the image of successful entrepreneurship suddenly looking like costume jewelry next to actual wealth. His face flushed red as the implications sank in. His older brother, the family afterthought, had quietly built an empire while Derek collected family subsidies and played pretend businessman. "You're a millionaire?" Crystal asked, her voice small and confused. "But you drive that old Honda. Cars depreciate." I shrugged. "Real estate appreciates," Derek exploded. "This is impossible. You're lying or exaggerating or something. There's no way you built that kind of wealth from some little house repairs. No way." His outburst attracted attention from the entire family. Even the kids stopped playing to watch Derek gesturing wildly at his phone, as if the internet could somehow disprove Billy's research. "Show me the proof," Derek demanded. "Show me bank statements or documents or something. Anyone can claim to own buildings." Billy held up his phone. "It's all public record, Derek. Property deeds, sale prices, transfer dates. Tony's signature is on dozens of commercial real estate transactions. This isn't a claim. This is documented fact." The truth crashed over Derek like a cold wave. His younger brother, the one who'd always received everything, was learning that his older brother had achieved everything Derek pretended to possess. The family dynamic that had existed for 30 years had just been exposed as complete fiction. Derek's explosion was volcanic and public, witnessed by 3 generations of Harper relatives who would remember this moment for the rest of their lives. Derek's voice carried across Uncle Frank's ranch like a siren, drawing the attention of every family member within 200 yards. His face had turned purple with rage, and he was jabbing his finger at me while screaming accusations that grew more incoherent by the second. "You didn't earn any of this," he shouted, gesticulating wildly at his phone screen showing Billy's property research. "You only succeeded because of family money, the same family that handed you everything while I had to work for scraps. You've been lying about your wealth, hiding it from us, pretending to be modest while you're secretly rich. The irony of Derek's words hit every family member simultaneously. Here stood a 30-year-old man who hadn't paid his own rent in 12 years, accusing his financially independent brother of succeeding through family support. Crystal backed away from Derek slowly, her expression shifting from confusion to embarrassment as she realized her boyfriend was having a public breakdown. "Derek," I said calmly, "I never hid anything. Nobody ever asked about my business details." "Because you downplayed everything," he screamed back. "You made it sound like small deals while you were secretly making millions. That's deception. That's fraud. You manipulated our family into thinking you were just scraping by." Cousin Janet stepped forward tentatively. "Derek, calm down. This is supposed to be a celebration." "Celebration of what?" Derek whirled toward her. "Celebrating how my brother conned everyone while I struggled to build a legitimate business? He's a fraud and a liar." That's when Uncle Frank slowly stood up from his lawn chair by the grill. At 74 years old, Frank Harper commanded respect through presence rather than volume. His weathered face showed 40 years of ranch work and honest labor, and his calm demeanor made Derek's hysteria appear even more unhinged by contrast. "Derek," Uncle Frank said quietly, "you need to settle down." "No," Derek shouted. "Everyone needs to know what Tony really is. He's not self-made. He's not independent. He succeeded because of family advantages, while I got nothing." Uncle Frank walked slowly toward the house, his boots clicking against the flagstone patio. "Actually, son, there's something you need to know. Something your parents never told you." Derek followed Uncle Frank with his eyes, his rant temporarily paused by curiosity. The entire family watched as Frank disappeared into his study and returned 30 seconds later carrying a manila envelope, the kind lawyers use for important documents. "I've been keeping records," Uncle Frank announced, settling back into his chair and opening the envelope. 40 years of ranching taught me to track expenses carefully. Numbers don't lie, and neither do bank statements." He pulled out several pages of handwritten notes, photocopied checks, and what appeared to be a detailed spreadsheet. Derek's face went pale as he recognized the systematic documentation of someone who'd been paying attention for a very long time. "Let me share some numbers with this family," Uncle Frank continued, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never spoken dishonestly in his life. "Derek, your parents have given you $340,000 over the past 15 years. Cash gifts, paid bills, covered expenses, and bailouts." Derek's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. Crystal stared at him with growing horror as the mathematical reality of his dependency became public knowledge. Uncle Frank consulted his notes. Soccer camps and equipment, $45,000. 3 cars, including insurance and repairs, $60,000. College tuition, room, board, and expenses, $95,000. Legal fees for your arrest, $75,000. Rent subsidies since college, $35,000. Credit card payments, $30,000. Each item hit Derek like a physical blow. Our parents had never shared these totals with him, allowing him to receive support without understanding its magnitude. Uncle Frank's documentation revealed the extent of Derek's financial dependency in brutal detail. "Want to know how much your parents gave Tony during the same period?" Uncle Frank asked, flipping to another page. $0. Not 1 cent. In fact, Tony loaned them money twice for household repairs and never asked for repayment. The silence stretched across the patio like a physical weight. 43 family members absorbed the implications of Uncle Frank's revelation. Derek had received the equivalent of a luxury home's worth of support, while Tony had built wealth entirely through his own efforts. "But that's not the most interesting part," Uncle Frank continued. "Derek, you've contacted me 17 times over the past 8 years asking for money. Loans for business ventures, help with credit card debt, assistance with car payments. I turned you down every time." Derek's face went ashen. He'd never mentioned these requests to anyone, believing they were private conversations with his uncle. Now his entire extended family knew about his pattern of seeking financial bailouts from relatives. Tony, on the other hand, called me exactly once for business advice when he was 24. I offered to co-sign a loan for his first commercial property. He thanked me politely and said he'd rather qualify on his own. That's the only financial conversation we've ever had. Uncle Frank stood up again, his expression grave but not unkind. 5 years ago, I wrote your parents a letter warning them that their favoritism was destroying both of their sons. I told them Derek would never learn independence while receiving constant support, and Tony would eventually distance himself from family that took him for granted. He reached into the envelope and pulled out a copy of a typed letter, several pages long. Your parents never responded to my letter. They continued enabling Derek's dependency while ignoring Tony's achievements. I predicted exactly what happened here today. Derek looked around desperately for support from family members, but found only uncomfortable stares and disappointed faces. His public meltdown had revealed character flaws that extended far beyond financial irresponsibility. His willingness to attack Tony while demanding family loyalty exposed a selfishness that shocked relatives who'd known him since childhood. The difference between you boys, Uncle Frank said, settling back into his chair, is that Tony learned to solve his own problems, while Derek learned to expect others to solve them for him. Tony built wealth through discipline and hard work. Derek consumed wealth through entitlement and excuses. Crystal quietly gathered her purse and walked toward the Mercedes without saying goodbye to Derek. The public revelation of his financial dependence and emotional instability had ended their relationship as decisively as Nicole's discovery of his debts had ended his engagement. Tony, Uncle Frank called out as the family began to disperse. I'm proud of what you've accomplished. You did it the right way, without shortcuts or handouts. That's character. Derek slumped into a lawn chair, his rage replaced by the crushing realization that his entire adult life had been built on a foundation of family subsidies and self-deception. Every family member now knew the truth about his financial situation, his emotional instability, and his pattern of blaming others for problems he'd created. The reunion continued for another hour, but the atmosphere had permanently shifted. Tony Harper was no longer the family afterthought. He was the family's success story, and everyone wanted to understand how he'd achieved so much while remaining humble about his accomplishments. Derek sat alone by the pool, scrolling through his phone and presumably trying to figure out how to get home without Crystal. His carefully constructed image of entrepreneurial success had been destroyed by Uncle Frank's documentation and his own emotional breakdown. Justice had arrived at the Harper family reunion, delivered not through vengeance or cruelty, but through simple truth-telling and mathematical reality. The golden child had been revealed as fool's gold, while the neglected son had proven himself to be actual gold. But the story wasn't over yet. The drive back to Denver gave me 8 hours to process what had happened at Uncle Frank's ranch. Derek's public meltdown had exposed family dynamics that everyone suspected but nobody had ever acknowledged directly. Uncle Frank's documentation had provided mathematical proof of favoritism that could no longer be rationalized or ignored. For the first time in my life, my family's treatment of Derek and me had been examined honestly by neutral observers. My phone rang constantly during the trip. Cousin Billy called to apologize for inadvertently triggering the confrontation. Aunt Linda called to express admiration for my accomplishments and shame about the family's previous indifference. Cousin Janet called to ask business advice for her husband's struggling construction company. But the most important call came from Dad. Tony. His voice sounded exhausted and defeated. We need to talk. About what? About everything. About Derek. About you. About what we've done wrong for so many years. I pulled over at a rest stop near Castle Rock, sensing this conversation required my full attention. I'm listening. Your uncle was right, Dad continued, his voice breaking. We destroyed Derek by giving him everything, and we failed you by taking your independence for granted. I don't know how to fix what we've done. It was the first time either parent had acknowledged their favoritism directly. No excuses about Derek's potential or special needs. No deflection about family loyalty or shared resources. Just honest admission that their parenting had damaged both sons in different ways. Derek called us crying after you left, Dad said. He admitted that his business ventures have been failures, that he's been living on credit cards and our support, and that he lied about his success because he was ashamed of depending on us at 30 years old. I remained silent, processing the implications of Derek's honesty. Acknowledgement was the first step toward change, but Derek had acknowledged problems before without following through on solutions. "We're stopping all financial support immediately," Dad continued. "No more rent payments, no more credit card help, no more bailouts. Derek needs to learn what you learned 20 years ago." "What's he going to do?" "He asked if you'd consider giving him a job. Not charity, not a handout. A real job where he could learn real skills and earn real money." The request surprised me. Derek had never expressed interest in honest work, preferring schemes that promised easy wealth without effort. His willingness to ask for employment rather than investment suggested genuine recognition that his approach hadn't worked. "I'll think about it," I told Dad. "There's something else," he said. "We want to make amends for all the years we ignored your success. Would you be willing to speak at our retirement planning seminar next month? Some of our friends have heard about your real estate investments and want to learn from you." The irony was stunning. After 30 years of dismissing my achievements, my parents now wanted to showcase my expertise to their social circle. But the gesture represented genuine recognition of my abilities rather than attempt to profit from them. "I'll think about that too," I said. 6 months later, Derek was working construction for one of my renovation contractors. I hadn't hired him directly to avoid family complications, but I'd recommended him to Jake Morrison, who owned a reliable framing crew. Derek started at $15 per hour, the same wage I'd earned doing similar work 15 years earlier. The transformation was remarkable. Derek lost 20 pounds from physical labor, developed actual skills with tools and materials, and began understanding the relationship between effort and results. More importantly, he stopped posting fake success stories on social media and started sharing honest updates about learning construction trades. "I never realized how hard real work was," he told me during a coffee meeting in downtown Denver. "I spent so many years thinking I was too good for manual labor, but this is the most satisfied I've ever felt with a job." Derek had moved into a modest apartment that he could afford on his construction wages. No family support, no credit card debt, no pretense about entrepreneurial ventures. He was learning to live within his means for the first time in his adult life. "I owe you an apology," he continued, stirring sugar into his coffee with hands that were permanently stained from work. "Everything I said at the reunion was wrong. You earned every dollar through your own efforts, and I was just jealous that you succeeded where I'd failed." The apology meant more than I'd expected. Derek's acknowledgement of my work and his own failures represented genuine growth rather than strategic positioning for future favors. "I'm proud of what you're doing now," I told him honestly. "Learning real skills and earning your own money takes courage, especially when you're starting later than most people." Derek nodded thoughtfully. "It's humbling to be a 30-year-old construction apprentice, but humility is what I needed. I spent so many years thinking I deserved success without earning it." Our parents had undergone their own transformation. They attended my real estate investment seminar and brought 12 friends who wanted to learn about property investment strategies. For the first time in my life, they introduced me as our successful son, Tony, rather than Derek's older brother. Mom called monthly to ask about my business developments and personal life. Not perfunctory check-ins, but genuine conversations about my interests and goals. She'd started reading real estate investment books and asked thoughtful questions about market analysis and renovation planning. Dad had restructured their retirement planning based on principles I'd shared about asset accumulation and cash flow management. Instead of expensive vacations and luxury purchases, they were building wealth for their golden years, while Derek built character through honest labor. Uncle Frank became my unofficial business advisor and closest family relationship. We spoke weekly about property acquisitions, market trends, and investment strategies. His ranch provided a retreat where I could decompress from business pressures while learning about livestock management and agricultural investment opportunities. "You handled Derek's situation perfectly," he told me during one visit. "You didn't enable his problems, but you didn't abandon him either. Creating opportunities for him to succeed through his own efforts was the right approach." The following year's family reunion was completely different from the previous disaster. Derek arrived in work clothes, driving a used pickup truck he'd bought with his own money. He spent the afternoon helping Uncle Frank with ranch maintenance and talking with cousins about construction techniques and home renovation projects. When dinner conversations turned to business and career updates, Derek proudly reported his promotion to crew supervisor and his plans to start a small remodeling company within 2 years. No exaggerations, no fictional success stories, Just honest progress earned through disciplined effort. I'm learning from the best, he said, nodding toward me with genuine respect. Tony showed me that success comes from solving problems and creating value, not from shortcuts and schemes. The family dynamic had permanently shifted. My success was acknowledged and celebrated, while Derek's growth was encouraged and supported. Instead of competition and resentment, we developed mutual respect based on honest accomplishment. Uncle Frank pulled me aside as the reunion was ending. You know what impresses me most about this whole situation? What's that? You never gave up on Derek, even when he gave up on himself. You created a path for him to find his way back to the family, but only after he'd learned to respect what family really means. The lesson extended beyond our family, to everyone facing similar dynamics with entitled siblings, spoiled relatives, or unequal treatment from parents. True family support means teaching independence, not enabling dependence. Love sometimes requires allowing people to fail so they can learn to succeed. And success earned through honest effort creates lasting satisfaction that inherited wealth never provides. As I drove home from Uncle Frank's ranch that evening, I reflected on the journey from neglected older brother to respected family patriarch. The path had required patience, discipline, and the courage to succeed despite family indifference. But the destination was worth every challenge along the way. Derek texted me the next morning. Thanks for giving me the chance to become someone worth respecting. See you at next month's job site. That message meant more than any rental income, property appreciation, or business success. My little brother had finally grown up, and our family had finally learned what really mattered. Have you ever experienced favoritism in your family that made you question your own worth? How did you handle a situation where your hard work was overlooked while someone else received unearned support? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments about overcoming family challenges and finding your own path to success. Please like this story if it resonated with your own experiences. Subscribe for more real-life stories about resilience and family dynamics, and share it with anyone who might benefit from hearing that true success comes from personal integrity, not family favoritism. Thanks for listening to my story, and remember that your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to treat yourself and others.